Welcome everybody to our conversation with the creators of Furnace and Fugue, a digital edition of Michael Mayer's Atalanta Fugiens, an alchemical emblem book from 1618. I'm Nadine Zimmerli and I'm your host for this event, and I'm the editor for history at the University of UVA Press. And it is my pleasure today to introduce you to this born digital scholarly book and all of its creators. Thank you for joining us. Furnace and Fugue is the first project developed by the Center for Digital Scholarship at Brown University as part of its Mellon-funded Digital Publications Initiative. It was peer-reviewed and has now been published by UVA Press as part of our distinguished academic series on studies in early modern German history, edited by Eric Middleford. As some of you might know, Mayer's intriguing multimedia masterpiece reinterprets Ovid's Legend of Atalanta as an alchemical allegory in a series of 50 emblems. Each of these emblems contains text, images, and a musical score for 3 voices. Furnace and Fugue now re-renders Mayer's creation as an enhanced and interactive digital scholarly work that allows contemporary readers, hopefully all of you, to read, hear, see, manipulate, and investigate all of these elements. This digital edition also contains scholarly essays that frame Mayer's 17th century work for scholars, students, and general readers alike. This is a free, open access resource available for all of you to explore fully and share widely. Today, we are excited to tell you more about the scholarship that infuses Furnace and Fugue and the digital tools that bring Mayer's masterpiece to life. Joining me today as panelists are Allison Levy, the digital scholarship editor at Brown University, Crystal Brusch, designer for online publications at Brown University, Tara Nummedal, professor of history and Italian studies at Brown University and one of the editors of Furnace and Fugue, Donna Bilak, also an editor of Furnace and Fugue, who is an academic and a goldsmith, and the creative director of 12 Piece Consultancy and Design, and Loren Ludwig, a scholar and performer based in Baltimore, Maryland, who is a contributor to Furnace and Fugue. For the first part of this webinar, I will have a conversation with the 5 panelists, and they will each introduce you to and contextualize different facets of Furnace and Fugue. Each panelist will speak for about 10 minutes. Then, after we've had this conversation and heard from our panelists, we hope to have a conversation with you, our audience. Please feel free to pose your questions in the Q&A feature throughout the first part of the webinar. We will monitor and either answer in writing, or I will collect and answer your questions, or the panelists will answer your questions during the Q&A portion of the webinar today. So let's begin with our presentations. First up, I wanted to reintroduce Alison Levy. And Alison, as I already said, is the digital editor at Brown University. She also serves as general editor of the Amsterdam University Press book series, Visual and Material Culture from 1300 to 1700. Thank you for joining us, Alison, and welcome.
Thank you, Nadine.
And Alison, my question to you is that Brown's Digital Publications Initiative is creating a number of innovative digital projects like Furnace and Fugue, which have large implications for the way scholarship is produced, evaluated, and published. Can you say more about the initiative itself and its goals for the future production and dissemination of scholarship?
Thanks again, Nadine, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for a very exciting program for a wonderfully celebratory occasion to launch Furnace and Fugue. And my congratulations to Tara and Donna for great accomplishment. So Brown's Digital Publications Initiative, which last fall received renewed support from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation through 2025, is a collaboration between the University Library and the Office of the Dean of the Faculty. The initiative extends the university's mission of supporting and promoting innovative faculty scholarship, while also helping to catalyze both the practice and the recognition of digital scholarship in the humanities, both on campus and beyond. Now 5 years in to what was a very and remains experimental endeavor for us, we have arrived at a viable university-based model for the creation of born digital enhanced scholarly monographs. Seeing growing interest in this effort from faculty at Brown and finding that the publisher landscape is also evolving in favor of these developments, Brown is paving the way for the creation as well as the validation of new and impactful scholarly forms. We currently have 6 projects in our portfolio in various stages of development. One, of course, just published. And these are in the fields of history, Italian studies, religious studies, history of art and architecture, literary arts, and theater arts and performance studies. And of course, I know today we are here to celebrate Furnace and Fugue, but I just wanted to point out that our second project will be forthcoming with Stanford University Press, and we have another project currently under review with another university press. We accept 1 to 2 new projects per year, and so you can expect some announcements forthcoming. Also, for the first time, we'll be working with a visiting faculty member at Brown this year, Provost Visiting Professor Renee Ader, who works on contemporary monuments to slavery. So that, that project as well will be coming on board to the Center for Digital Scholarship, and we'll be developing that along with faculty projects. So Furnace and Fugue dissolves so many boundaries. I think this is what is so extremely exciting about the project. And on the right, just as a sort of prompt, I'm showing you a detail from Emblem 11, which appears in the 17th century text with the caption, "Tear up the books." We are certainly not condoning the literal ripping apart of printed matter, but the entire team did have to rethink how we do scholarship, how it's produced and how it's shared. So certainly the co-editors and all of the contributors had to completely rethink the practice of research and of writing. Readers will find, as a result, very new ways of engaging with the arguments and with the resources, including interactive features that bring a new level of agency to the users, which is simply not possible in print. And certainly the editorial teams, both at Brown and at Virginia, had to rethink certain practices that haven't changed much in decades, such as peer review, copy editing, dissemination, and discoverability. And my colleague Crystal Brusch is going to speak about challenges that face the design team and is going to present some of the problems and the solutions that they were able to find. So before I turn it over to Crystal, though, I just want to end my remarks with another emblem. This is Emblem 42, which I think very perfectly captures the objective and the promise of this very fruitful partnership between Brown and University of Virginia Press. And that is us working together to pave the way to light the future for digital scholarship. So with that, I will, I think, hand it back to Nadine.
Yes, thank you very much, Alison. And indeed, it's been a wonderful and very fruitful partnership. And as you've already indicated now, I'd like to go to and reintroduce Crystal Brusch, the designer for online publications at Brown University. Crystal is going to give us a quick demonstration of the project and its many, many exciting features. And as you do so, Crystal, I was wondering if you can speak to the value of an interactive digital text and what it offers readers over a traditional print publication.
Sure, Nadine. Just take over. So my name is Crystal Brusch, and I'm just going to take you through some of the core parts of Furnace and Fugue. And as I do that, I'll try and highlight some of the challenges that we had taking this from a print publication to a digital publication, and some of the ways that we tried to improve on the print publication as well. So we'll start off with our landing page. And our two core parts of the site are the digital edition of Atalanta Fugiens and a set of scholarly essays. And we also start you off with the content so people can get an overview of all of the parts of the site that are available, and an introductory paragraph just so you can get a feel of what you're looking at before you dive in. So here, starting at the table of contents, we have also a set of introductory brief essays that give some context about alchemy, Michael Meyer, and printmaking. And then we get to our main parts, digital edition, and a list of essays. So starting off with reading the digital edition, that Nadine said, the 17th century alchemical emblem book. It's a set of 50 emblems, as well as a few pages of front matter. So I'm going to, let's see, pick an emblem to highlight for you all. Here you have a navigation, a way of getting through the emblems. You can also go to the table of contents to get to each of them as well. We'll try emblem 8. And one of the things that we did with this book is that we took the web as this vertical scrolling medium and we sort of rearranged the book. It actually starts off with notation as the first page, so an emblem set. And the emblems they consist of the music, a motto, an image, an epigram, and discourse. But here we actually start off with a motto, sort of like a heading, the image, and then we go into the music. And as you scroll through the page, on the left side, the digital edition, it also is coordinated or in sync with the pages on the right, the right side is the digital edition, the left side is the images from the book. So as here, we'll go back to the epigram and the page will change. As we go to the discourse, the page will change. And go to the second page of the discourse, that updates for you as well. Another thing that's in sync with the digital edition is the music. So this is actually a fugue for 3 voices. And as you play it, I'll demonstrate it for you in a moment, you can actually follow along with the notation as the performers are singing. And you have the ability to turn off or isolate voices and pause as you want to compare with possibly the image on the left. So, let me show you right You can see in here as I'm turning off voices, they're either getting muted and they're also getting faded out visually. And one of the things we wanted to do with digital is to actually open this up to a wide range of audiences, people who are not musicologists or may not read notations. We also have a piano roll where people can see some of the patterns that are playing out in the music, even if they don't read music. So it has the same features, allow you to mute and pause. So the digital edition also has a variety of views. You can view the entire digital edition without the emblem page. And you can also look at the emblem pages themselves, so you can actually read the book in its print order. But going back to the comparative view, one of the things that we worked really hard at was actually getting the text to give readers a variety of ways to read a text. So if the book itself was printed in Latin and German, but if you don't read Latin, you can also look at the text in English, both in normalized and diplomatic. So you can see diplomatic has an older spelling. It's based off of an older transcription of the book. We do the same with Latin and with German. You can see the heading, German heading here is actually matching up with the title of the music here. So going on to the scholarly essays. This is sort of a mini table of contents for the 8 of those. And I think I'll pick sound and vision to sort of take you on a preview of what we do with the essays as well. Here we have the essays broken down by section, and anyone can jump to whatever section they'd like to, and I'll just scroll you right to where you want to start reading. But as we go through each of our essays, as well as the digital edition itself and the whole publication, they each have a DOI. And one thing that we have carried over from the digital edition is this ability to zoom. So I don't know if you noticed, but the pages on the left of the digital edition, I might just show you briefly. Try 3. They have a deep zooming feature. So if there's details you want to sort of focus on, you can do that very easily. And we do the same thing in the essays. Not to the same level, but it's really seamless with the text. So I think it works really well. We also have other features that, like inline notes, that you can pull up without having to jump around the page. And another great feature is the sort of animations that we've created will actually highlight some of the author's arguments as you're reading in these really subtle and helpful ways. If you don't know, for example, what Lagan is or who Lagan is, it will actually point that out for you so you know what part of the image that you're actually trying to focus on. And let's see, the zooming feature. Carrying through the essays for the pages that are from the Emblem book from Atalanta Fugiens. So another feature of the essays that I want to point out is our collections drawer. So as the authors are writing, they can actually create a set or curate a set of emblems that they can share with you. And you can also take emblems from the page, from the essays that they're talking about, and either add them to your existing collection or create a new collection. So let's try one right now. Call this book launch. And that pulls up the collections drawer that actually exists at the bottom of the page throughout most of the site. So I'll pull that up again. You can see here I have an existing collection. You can reorder anything that's already there, and you can add additional emblems if you decide you want to explore more of the book. You can delete collections. You can share collections, which is actually really helpful. This doesn't actually, the collections space actually saves your collections via cookies on your browser, but if you want to share them with somebody else, all you have to do is sort of click this, it copies this link to your clipboard, and anyone else can add your collection to theirs. They're completely independent of each other, so they can start building off of your work just the same way that you as a reader might build off of the author's collections. So a few other things I want to point out in the collections are these tags. Anything in yellow is actually comparing tags across emblems in the collection, so you can see any intersecting topics or anything that's different that you want to sort of explore. You also have the ability to resize and zoom in on a specific emblem. This collection drawer is tightly integrated with the digital edition as well. So you can click on it if you want to go to the digital edition page to actually read more of this emblem. And you can also click on any of these tags here, and that would take you to the last space that I want to highlight, which is our image search. Collections drawer is really sort of an image-driven space, but this allows you to search the images by facets. The facets are tags that you saw in the collections drawer as well. So let's say we want to go to architecture, we want to check out cityscapes. We can add that to our people sitting in cityscapes facet. And this visualization here will show you what part of the book the results are in. And you can view the tags for each individual emblem that you get in your results window. You can go to the emblem as well in the digital edition if you'd like to view it there. And you can add things to your collection. Let's say we add it to an existing collection, and the collections drawer comes up there as well. So everything is really well integrated to sort of give you like this seamless experience of being able to interpret the book, read the book, and rearrange it in ways that will hopefully produce new scholarship. So I think with that, Nadine, that'll conclude my tour of the digital edition of Furnace and Fugue, scholarly essays, this image space. And I hope that illustrates also the ways that we sort of took advantage of the capabilities of the web to go beyond what the print book had to offer and expand on that and hopefully allow other people to take that to new places. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Crystal. I'm always really moved when I hear the music and amazed at the bells and whistles of this digital edition that you've been able to integrate into this wonderful, wonderful, just general product. And thank you also for spotlighting the scholarly essays, which brings me to Tara Nummedal, who I've already introduced briefly as the professor of history and Italian studies at Brown University. And Tara there teaches courses in early modern European history and the history of science. And her research explores the intersection of alchemy, gender, religious, and political culture in early modern Germany writ large. She's the author of Alchemy and Authority in the Holy Empire, and most recently, Anna Zieglerin and The Lion's Blood, Alchemy and End Times in Reformation Germany. So Tara, Furnace and Fugue is a serious piece of scholarship, as we just saw in this brief walkthrough that Crystal did. It's really an edited book conceived of and presented as an interactive digital product. Can you tell us about the scholarly innovation that Furnace and Fugue seeks to make, and also elaborate on the usefulness of this digital collection for teaching students about the early modern world in college courses?
Yes, thank you, Nadine, and thanks to everyone for being here with us today. So, at its heart, Furnace and Fugue is a study and an edition of a 17th century printed book, Atalanta Fugiens, by the German physician, alchemist, Rosicrucian defender, Michael Meyer. Atalanta Fugiens rereads the classical myth of Atalanta as an alchemical recipe for making the philosopher's stone. And as we've already mentioned, Meyer does this through a collection of 50 emblems, each of which contains multiple parts: a motto and an epigram in German and in Latin, a copperplate etching, the score of a fugue for 3 voices, and a Latin discourse that purports to expand on the emblem's themes and meanings. Now, in 1618, most alchemical texts were nowhere near as elaborate or, frankly, as beautiful as Atalanta Fugiens. This original book was multimedia in the sense that it includes musical score, images, and text. And it was also interactive in the way that it invited readers in to explore the book's parts in all kinds of different orders, right? Making connections within the parts of any one emblem and across emblems as well. In all of this sort of detail, Atalanta Fugiens really was exceptional in 1618. And it's perhaps for that reason that it's become such a well-known book today, particularly to historians of alchemy, current people interested in practicing alchemy, early music scholars and performers and art historians. We're certainly not the first people to write about Atalanta Fugiens, but Furnace and Fugue departs from previous scholarship on the book in some significant ways, and I want to highlight those here today. So the first thing is that many of the scholars who have written about Atalanta Fugiens before have done so in part from modern disciplinary perspectives. So Hilda Marie Streich and Jocelyn Godwin wrote about the music, for example, and Helena de Jong analyzed the texts, and particularly the sources of Meyer's epigrams and discourses. And all of this work has advanced our understanding of Atalanta Fugiens in really important ways, and certainly this kind of deep disciplinary expertise is crucial for situating Meyer's project in very specific kind of philosophical, artistic, musical, literary contexts. What we wanted to do here, though, was something different, and that is to explore Atalanta Fugiens as a multimedia artifact, as a book that can't actually be entirely broken apart without losing some of its core meanings. The difficulty with this for us today is that where in 1618 Meyer could reasonably expect a single reader, particularly an erudite reader, to have the wide-ranging knowledge and skill set to engage his book, we can't. So really grappling with Atalanta Fugiens today requires a multidisciplinary collaboration. Most of us don't have Meyer's skill set. And so Furnace and Fugue emerged out of an intentional collaboration through a series of workshops that led up to this publication among scholars of early modern print and book curators and music and art and philosophy, mathematics, alchemy, and practicing musicians and so on as we explored the book together. The second point I want to make is that Furnace and Fugue takes a fresh look at Atalanta Fugiens in light of a real transformation in the history of alchemy in recent decades. Early modern alchemy was once seen as either sort of negatively as superstition or pseudoscience, or, when more positively, as a primarily literary or philosophical project, closely linked with Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, or other kinds of early modern philosophy. More recently, though, historians have argued that early modern alchemy was also fundamentally a material endeavor, right? A set of practices deeply engaged with understanding and, crucially, transforming matter, and that it was something closely associated with early modern science and medicine in the period of the scientific revolution. So we were really informed by this new scholarly perspective in the history of alchemy. And in doing so, we want to reposition Atalanta Fugiens, not only as a literary or philosophical text, cleverly adorned with music, but also as an invocation of and a meditation on actual laboratory technologies, maybe even a guide to the production of the Philosopher's Stone, but also an argument about the relationship between the intellect and the senses. So Furnace and Fugue is built around the idea that Atalanta Fugiens is a playful epistemological tool. We don't see the book as linear. It was not, in our view, meant to be read precisely in order to pull out all of its meanings. And actually, it doesn't even make a lot of sense if you read it that way, to be honest. Instead, from our perspective, Meyer's readers could reorder, resequence, or focus in on different elements of Atalanta Fugiens each time they opened the book. They could use it to generate almost endless new insights into nature's secrets. And that's the insight that we've really built into our edition with the collections feature and the search functions, and allowing users to kind of reorganize the book in a way that they want to explore. We also see Atalanta Fugiens, that is the authors of the scholarly essays here, as a commentary on shifting anxieties around particularly the early modern disciplines that bridged sense and intellect, or theory and practice, or scholarship and craft in the late 16th and early 17th century. So the forms of knowledge at the heart of Meyer's book, music, medicine, mathematics, art, alchemy, all of these were framed on the one hand by natural philosophy and theory, but they were also a set of practices and that really required knowledge of technique and the material world as well. And so it's the very nature of these mixed arts that raised questions in the early modern period about exactly what they were. Were they a philosophy? Were they a craft? Some kind of mixture of the two? And what was the relationship among these different parts of any of these fields as we might think of them today? And these questions about education and training and practice and expertise also mirrored social concerns about the position of the alchemist, the artist, and the musician between court and university and workshop. And so what we want to suggest here is that perhaps Meyer placed art, alchemy, music, more subtly perhaps mathematics, in conversation with one another in Atalanta Fugiens, because all of these arts grappled with a similar set of issues about the relationships among different forms of expertise, training, and practice in these mixed disciplines. Now, Donna, Bilak, and I, and all of us involved in creating this project really wanted to take advantage of digital technologies to make these arguments in innovative ways. We wanted to draw all of our own senses into our reading practices. And we've already mentioned the way in which reading this book is a different kind of experience from reading the books that so many of us are used to reading. We also wanted to take advantage of the digital possibilities here to make the book accessible to those of us today who lacked Meyer's erudition, but also to all kinds of other audiences who might be new to this material. Scholars, yes, but also performers and students and graphic designers, anyone who might find an interest in this book. I'd like to finish up, though, with a few comments in particular on how we have used Furnace and Fugue in the classroom. A few of us have played around with it. This fall, I think, will be our big experiment in teaching with this book. So the first point is that Furnace and Fugue makes Atalanta Fugiens accessible. We have a copy of this book in special collections at Brown University. I've taken my students to see it over the years, many, many times. And they always looked at it and said, that's an amazing book. I have no idea what it says or what it means. And I could give them a lecture about it, but they couldn't approach it very easily themselves. We have tried to build in elements in Furnace and Fugue that will allow them to get into the book themselves. So we have these 3 introductory essays about alchemy, about Meyer, about early modern print, that can help orient readers who don't have a lot of background, specialist background in this material. We include a translation, an English translation, or if you want to read in the original languages, you can do that as well. And we've included recordings of the music so that you can hear the music, even if you can't read early modern notation. For teaching, I just want to end by emphasizing the way in which the structure of Furnace and Fugue, and in fact of Atalanta Fugiens, really lends itself to small kind of bite-sized student research projects that can take students into the history of alchemy, yes, but also science more broadly, art, music, printed book. I've had students pick a single emblem. So for example, one of my students picked emblem 29, the salamander, and use Meyer's accompanying discourse as a kind of portal into the relationship between, in this case, alchemy and natural history in the early modern period. Meyer incorporates quotations from lots of other texts, and so it's really like a way into the early modern corpus of natural knowledge. The collections feature allows students to assemble their own set of emblems and to explore the relationships among them, perhaps in conversations with the scholarly essays. So for example, you could put together, you could use the keywords to put together a collection of essays with women, for example, or mythological figures, or birds, or particular laboratory instruments. And those are just a couple of suggestions. We look forward to seeing how people teach with this. I have no doubt you'll come up with other ways to use it. And we're very excited to see what people do with this. So ultimately, you know, we're hoping that Furnace and Fugue will make productive scholarly interventions, both in our understanding of Atalanta Fugiens specifically, and of early modern knowledges more generally. But crucially, we really hope that this edition will encourage others to look more deeply at this enigmatic text. And we'd really love to see students use Furnace and Fugues to dive into Meyer's erudite and playful world. Furnace and Fugue was designed from the start as a digital book. We never could have anticipated the circumstances that has led so many of us this fall to be teaching and learning digitally, right? But we hope that Furnace and Fugue will allow students to kind of enter into Meyer's world in an engaging and accessible way, and to really explore and make their own interventions in our understanding of early modern European culture and knowledge. With that, I think I'll turn it back to Nadine.
Thank you so much, Tara. And yes, it is the right kind of book at the, unfortunately, right kind of time. And so as a press as well, we're really looking forward to seeing how this edition works in the classroom and how it points toward ways of the future in terms of disseminating scholarship and educating students, scholars who are already familiar with these kind of books, and the general reader alike. So let me now turn to Donna Bilak and reintroduce her, the other editor on Furnace and Fugue. As I already mentioned, Donna is an academic and a goldsmith, and the creative director of 12P's Consultancy and Design, LLC. As a historian of early modern science, she specializes in the study of emblematics and the examination of jewelry and artisanal technologies across cultures. Before receiving her PhD from the Bard Graduate Center, Donna worked as a designer and wax model maker in Toronto's jewelry industry. So Donna, I see Furnace and Fugue as a showcase for the best that collaborative scholarship has to offer. How did the community of scholars and performers that comprise the impressive list of contributors to Furnace and Fugue come into being?
Thank you, Nadine, and sincere thanks also to everyone who's taking the time to join our book launch. Welcome, yay! This is a wonderful full circle moment for me, and I've been chasing Atalanta for about 7 years now, and I am so happy to share with everyone this remarkable multidisciplinary collaboration that is my first book. So in relating how Furnace and Fugue's community of scholars emerged, I'll give a short project biography, super short, but starting with how Tara and I connected. Now, this was back in March 2015 at the Science History Institute in Philadelphia, where we held a workshop that brought together the team of experts that I had formed during my postdoctoral fellowship there in 2013 and 2014. Now, this fellowship at the Science History Institute supported my research into Atalanta Fugiens as a book designed as a hidden game that reveals itself to the reader when one apprehends the hidden clues in the music, images, and text. So as Tara mentioned, Atalanta Fugiens is a complex work, and its author, Michael Maya, was a polymath, and frankly, most of us today are not. So as I encountered disciplinary barriers in my research, I began to find and interact with experts in mathematics, music, classics, and at the conclusion of my postdoc at the Institute, Ronald Brashear, who was then its library director, generously funded a 2-day experimental workshop, this was in 2015, that brought together the team of diverse scholars and performers that had, in fact, organically formed around my research, around my postdoc research, to meet for the first time as a group. Before it was always just one-on-one with me, and we thought it would be really cool to see what would happen if everyone got together. So I additionally invited noted historians of music and of early modern science whose feedback I also wanted to elicit. And this is how I got to meet Tara, because I'm about to nerd out a little bit here. I'm a huge fan of her scholarship. So the Institute workshop was hands-on, it was experimental. We focused on playing with the book, like actually playing with it. Physically, we had different copies from different holdings in the region. And also we had the opportunity to explore the music guided by vocal performers, Les Canards Chantants, big shout out here, directed by Robin and Graham Beer. I was conflating Robin with Ron for a second there. The workshop also addressed the question of what Atalanta Fugiens could look like as a digital edition. And serendipitously, Brown Library had recently, at that time, received the Mellon Grant to support digital publication. So Tara and I decided to submit a proposal. I mean, why not? Let's just see what happens. And to our surprise, actually, in 2016, Furnace and Fugue was one of the 2 pilot projects that were chosen at Brown, which I thought was amazing because in choosing our project, the university took a chance on working with a faculty member that also involved bringing in me, an institutional outsider, who in turn brought to Brown a dynamic community of scholars and performers. So Tara and I may stand out as co-editors of this project, but Furnace and Fugue is the summa of this diverse community that emerged from the Science History Institute workshop, even as other students, scholars, professionals joined our project during its ensuing development across the next 3 to 4 years at Brown. So Furnace and Fugue has these 2 institutional parents. The Science History Institute, where the project came into being through my postdoc research, and Brown University, where Tara and I received support to realize this project as a digital publication through the library's Mellon-funded Digital Publications Initiative. Now, I've pulled together a super short PowerPoint presentation that lifts up the hood, so to speak, to show you something of the making of this project at Brown across the last 3 or 4 years, to give you a sense of its many people and moving parts. So I'm gonna flip over to this now, share, and here we are, okay? The first, and let me just drop this down. Okay, so you're looking at a montage here, which shows Furnace and Fugue development at various stages and at various periods of time. For example, the 2 images here, hang on, let me go. Yeah, 2 images here from the 2015 Science History Institute workshop that show Loren and Ron Brashear. Then a Bard Graduate Center lecture and performance with LCC, Les Canards Chantants, and Loren, as well as myself. The 2016 Brown workshop and ensuing project development over the next few years. And I'll end this particular montage with the image of myself, Tara, and Allison. So the next image, is you're looking at the front of the John D. Rockefeller Library in Providence, Rhode Island, one of Brown's main libraries. We call it the Rock. Furnace and Fugue development really began with the second experimental workshop that we held at Brown University in February 2016. And we've got the Rock here, and this workshop convened an interdisciplinary community of students, faculty, scholars, and performers from around the US and Europe to further explore and experiment with Atalanta Fugiens as a digital edition. So it started with a performance by Les Canards Chantants, which you see in the upper left-hand corner. And the other images on this page show workshop participants inside the library in various breakout rooms, as well as breakout chairs, as it turned out to be. We all clustered up in the gathering room there. Also, this next montage details the diversity of approaches that we all took to reimagining Atalanta Fugiens as a digital publication. So you see, this involved a lot of creative energy, discussion, debate, paper. On that point, I just love the snap of Pete Forshaw, one of our Furnace and Fugue contributors, on day 2 of the Brown workshop, using his iPad and his notebook with his stack of Atalanta playing cards that he made up in front of him. As we're pulling apart digitally Atalanta Fugiens on the big screen with his lunch apple, which is probably the book's greatest symbol, unselfconsciously on the table beside him. More snaps from different stages of Furnace and Fugue's development across the past few years. This is photos of Ellie Mylonis, who's part of the Brown Library Digital Scholarship team. Ellie Mylonis and I working in the Rock in coming up with the tags and the facets for the digital edition that Crystal has just shown you earlier in her presentation. So you can see a lot of photocopies went into this digital edition. This next slide shows scenes of us working on the TEI for the English translation, which is based on a 17th century manuscript. Again, with Ellie, as well as Brian Croxall, and the Brown PhD student, George Elliott, who's joining us on Skype. And I included a little photo of George here on the right-hand side with an arrow pointing to his Skype avatar. This next image you've seen earlier in Allison's presentation. It shows team meetings between Studio Rainwater and Brown's Digital Scholarship team in producing Furnace and Fugue. And also the music recordings, which were directed by Loren Ludwig, which took place in various recording campaigns at the Rock at Brown University, seen here, as well as at a recording studio in Yonkers, New York. And Lauren's going to talk to us more about the process of multi-tracking that characterizes the music in Furnace and Fugue. And these last snaps of Tara are of Tara and I on the left-hand side in one of our ongoing transatlantic Skype calls when she was on her Max Planck Fellowship. And here she's actually wishing me luck for my Italian Academy Fellowship application, which ties in the next image. I ended up receiving support from the Italian Academy at Columbia University for my work on Furnace and Fugue in its final stages. And this is a snap of me in my office at Columbia. I'm actually on the phone with another contributor, Eric Bianchi, and you can see my Furnace and Fugue essay is mapped out on the wall. So I'm going to stop share. And just to sum up really briefly, our project presents new kinds of relationships within the Academy. Tara and I represent an important model for cross-professional collaboration. And the Furnace and Fugue enterprise emerged through the efforts and risk-taking between an independent scholar and a tenured professor in how we fuse together our ideas, as well as our access to communities and resources in creating this project. But Furnace and Fugue, as you know, is much, much more than just Tara and I as editors, much more. Furnace and Fugue embodies disciplinary diversity by involving students, performers, mathematicians, Latinists, historians of music, of science, of art, digital scholars, rare book curators. and institutions. And within the Furnace and Fugue community, some of us are affiliated, others are not. But collectively, we represent academe. Brown's institutional support, together with the Mellon Grant, is the glue that holds this project together in providing the opportunity and the necessary resources to bring Furnace and Fugue into being. And the University of Virginia Press carries our project out into the world. Furnace and Fugue shows what collaboration across the Academy can produce, what we're capable of achieving when we work together. So I'm going to end on that and hand it back over to Nadine. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna, for this very important reminder of the really big community and the diversity within academia. And to me, it doesn't just take a village. It seems to take an entire city, if not continents, to bring together and bring out this wonderful digital project. And one of your contributors to Furnace and Fugue is also joining us today. And I now want to turn and ask and invite Loren Ludwig to share insights into his role for the project. As mentioned at the outset, Loren is a scholar and performer based in Baltimore, Maryland. He researches what he describes as polyphonic intimacy, the idea that music in the Western tradition is constructed to foster social relationships among its performers and also its listeners. Loren is a co-founder of The Strange Wilds and Science Ficta, and performs with Acronym and numerous ensembles in the US and abroad, hopefully again soon abroad, and hopefully again performing. He also serves as program coordinator for the program in the Arts, Humanities, and Health at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Thank you for joining us, Loren. And we've already gotten a taste of the eerily beautiful music in Furnace and Fugue from Crystal's presentation. What is the story behind the strange music that fills Atalanta Fugiens, and how does Furnace and Fugue allow readers to experience it?
Thank you, Nadine. Hey, everybody. The music in Meyer's book is weird and wonderful, eerie and beautiful. And one of our goals in presenting Furnace and Fugue is to give readers tools to dive deep, to explore the unique ways that the music is weird and wonderful, to maybe render some of that weirdness familiar and accessible to folks that don't necessarily read early modern notation or are that accustomed to sight-singing canonic polyphony with their friends, modern readers, in other words. Another component of what we're hoping to offer with this is tools for folks not only to understand the historical dimensions of the music, but to find their own connections between the music and the images and the discourse, to basically dive into the book as modern readers, finding their own sets of meanings in the same way that Meyer might have imagined early modern readers would engage with it. So as various folks have alluded to, Meyer very cleverly mapped the 53 voice fugues, as he called them, to the Ovidian story that frames Atalanta Fugiens, and that of Atalanta and her suitor Hippomenes and the golden apples, the pomu morans, as they appear in the music, with which Hippomenes tricks Atalanta and wins the race. And the way that that's set up briefly is just that there is, in each fugue, there are 3 voices, and there's a slow-moving voice, the apple voice, which when you look at it on the page, you see all these round notes, some that have stems and some don't, that look like apples. And then the 2 other voices, the Atalanta voice and the Hippomenes voice, are a canon. They're imitating each other. Let's jump right into the book so we can look at this briefly. I'm going to share my screen and take us to Emblem 5 here. All right, well, we see we've got a good fast connection. Here we go. So Emblem 5 reads, put a toad to the woman's breasts that she may give it suck and die herself, and the toad grow fat with milk. So it's not just the music that's weird and wonderful in this book. And I'll just pause for a minute to look at the incredible engraving of a very ambivalent woman dealing with this toad and breast situation. So let's scroll down to the music, and before we look at the notation, I'm just going to jump into the piano roll that we saw before. And you can see here at the bottom is the slow-moving apple voice. And then if we were to move this red voice to the left and up a little bit, you'd see that it would lay perfectly on top. They would lay perfectly on top of each other. They're identical. They're just displaced in time and pitch. And I bring that up because the dimensions of that bear meaning for Meyer, the particular canonic fugal details of the way these pieces are put together, Meyer is enlisting to kind of talk to the other elements of the emblem. So it's fun to be able to see this visually in a few different ways and to hear it in different ways. I'm going to pivot back to the modern notation to while we play here. So let's listen to just a little bit, and then I want to point out some of the weirdness here. If you listen to or engage with a lot of 16th and 17th century music, your ears probably perked up, particularly at some weirdnesses here. To help elucidate that, we can just silence one of the voices and look at the next. We can look at how two of these voices interact and where some of the weirdness comes from. So let's pause there, because what we have in that section are what music theorists would call parallel octaves between these bottom two voices. You see, it's a D in the apple voice and a C in the apple voice and a C in the Hippomenes voice, moving to a D in both voices, and that is completely forbidden in 16th and 17th century polyphony. It's a mistake that would get you rapped on the knuckles by your composition teacher, you know, as a 10-year-old. So what's going on here? Why are these weird mistakes propagating in this masterful book that Meyer published? It turns out, and this is one of the contributions of this volume, is a description of the discovery that 40 of these 50 fugues were actually composed by an English composer in the generation prior to Meyer. And he wasn't a composer particularly. He was great at other things. Michael Meyer, he was a Latin epigrammatist and master of the alchemical corpus, but he wanted music to be part of this collection. So he borrowed 40 of these pieces and adapted them, but he was short 10 because the collection has 50 emblems, and he only had 40 fugues that he was able to borrow. So he tried his hand at composing 10, and they're filled with mistakes, and they're sort of wonderful, acoustically wonderful mistakes, and they're beautiful, weird pieces. But this helps resolve a kind of long-standing confusion about this volume, which is, how do we think about the music? If it's so uneven and inconsistent, how do we make meanings of it in relation to other things? So the addition in various ways, Furnace and Fugue in various ways, gives listeners and readers opportunities to look at the farmer pieces and listen to the farmer pieces, and then listen to what Meyer did with them and sort of how that process unfolded. There are 3 primary resources that Furnace and Fugue offers folks that want to pursue the musical aspect of this collection. One of them is a really wonderful modern performance edition, which is what we're looking at here, by Robin and Graham Beer of Le Canard Chantant, and they very painstakingly went through all of Meyer's compositions and rendered them in modern notation that makes them accessible to modern singers, but also clarifies many of the details that you would need to have spent a lot of time looking at 16th century music to parse. So that's a wonderful resource and is downloadable as a PDF. It's under the contents under contents here, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a standalone PDF that you can share with your students and musical colleagues. There are the recordings that we just touched upon, and it's really, I really encourage you to explore the weirdness and beautifulness of this music. There, you kind of get into a fugue state listening to these pieces. And then there are a couple of essays, one by Eric Bianchi, an associate professor at Fordham of music, describing early modern music, and my own essay about the relationship between Farmer's pieces and Meyer's pieces. I want to just close here. I know we're hoping for questions. Assistant Professor of History at Princeton, Jennifer Rampling, notes in her introductory essay on alchemy in the early modern period in Furnace and Fugue, that early modern readers learned to approach alchemical texts and images as puzzles to be solved. And I would add to that that canons and fugues in the 16th and 17th century were approached in the same way. They were puzzles, and they were designed to engage musicians and readers creatively, and they were freighted with all kinds of symbolic meanings. So there's a lot of resonance between fugues and canons and the alchemical corpus. Furnace and Fugue offers modern readers and musicians a set of digital tools to explore the puzzling features of Meyer's alchemical fugues. And I'll pass it back to Nadine. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody, for highlighting the scholarship features and the complexity of Furnace and Fugue. Again, to all of our attendees, this is an open access digital resource. So I invite you to go to the UVA Press catalog page for this online and to enter the world of Atalanta Fugiens through this portal. First, though, all of us are looking forward to reading and answering your questions. And we'll have about 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes to do so. So please ask away. I've already noted the first question, and it's a really good one. So is Furnace and Fugue a fixed format now, or could it be expanded since it is a digital product? There's links to Meyer's textual sources in the original language and in translation. So I think maybe that's a question for Allison and Crystal.
Thank you. Well, I can say that Furnace and Fugue has been completed and published, and we're eager to get feedback and invite you all to explore this digital publication at great length and to play with it and unpack it and bring your students into it. But we will not be expanding the digital publication. I can say that that's not one of the objectives of Brown's Digital Publications Initiative. We're not doing iterative or phased publications, though I do think there's great excitement in that. It's not what we're developing at the moment. But aside from many of the interactive features that were pointed out today, it's also possible to add annotation tools to the site, and so readers can make comments and maybe expand this idea on their own in the classroom.
Okay, thank you, Allison. And I think the next question is for Loren, and it's, do you know the earliest use of the phrase fugue state? The intriguing question.
It is an intriguing question, and I don't, and I'm going to run out on Google as soon as this is done and see if I can figure it out.
And I think the next question might also be for you, Loren, and the performers in general. Could you say more about playing in order to access the book? Was Meyer's idea of playing the same as yours or ours in general today? And did you and the other performers play the same way? Can you tell that? Is that a possibility? Have you thought about that in the creation of the music?
I'm guessing here that play, it's not just play music, that the whole thing is a sort of playful project, and I'm sure everybody has different registers of that in their thinking. Certainly, I think Meyer imagined that the erudite readers of his book would gather and engage socially around it, like either in, you know, alchemical experimentation and thinking, or in singing polyphony together. So certainly, one of our interventions is to imagine that most modern readers won't be able to sing Renaissance, you know, 16th century polyphony with their friends. So we've created a way that you can play with the music that doesn't entail having to sing it. Although, of course, you can also sing it. But I would defer to the other folks to talk maybe a little bit about how the idea of play comes in there and how that may have changed.
Could I jump in here and pick up on that? It's a great question, Zachary. Thank you. I think, you know, that this idea of the ludic in the early modern period, particularly in the late 16th century and into the 17th century, is really at the core of this book, that knowledge was often, particularly in a courtly context, which is what Meyer was aiming for, knowledge was meant to be, you know, sort of fun and open-ended and performative more than it was what it has become today, particularly scientific knowledge, which is you determine the truth, you've got your answer, you know, you move on. So I think there is absolutely an element of that in the early modern period. And I think, you know, since I was in graduate school in the 90s, there was this sort of trope of the early modern and the postmodern, you know, skipping over the modern from the Enlightenment to the 21st century, that there's some sort of commonalities there. So I think it is fair actually to see connections between the kind of open-ended, I mean, when I was in graduate school, it was the hyperlink, you know, because it was the 90s, that was like the early modern, you know, Meyer's book is full of hyperlinks to other early modern texts if you want to, you know, go that direction. So I think there's something that really lends itself in this book to digital exploration and, you know, the kind of zooming around and exploring connections. I mean, Foucault wrote about this as well, right? So I think that's part of what we wanted to capture. I'm guessing Donna has more to say about this, so maybe you want to jump in, Donna?
Thanks. I think Meyer plays with the book intentionally too, because he knows the rules to the genres that he's working with, for example, the Emblem book genre, and he bends them. Atalanta Fugiens is really ludic in nature. It's something that Loren and I have talked about in terms of ludic humanism. And I think what Tara and I and all of the collaborators of Furnace and Fugue picked up on is this playfulness, this ludic element, this possible, probable expectation by the creator, Michael Meyer, to his readers to play with the book. And that really informed how we reimagined the book in a playable form, in a digital format. So playfulness plays out, sorry, puns everywhere, terrible, but playfulness plays out in these different ways with the music, with the way the book was designed by the author, and also with what we as 21st century readers can do with it, so.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. And I just want to give a big thank you and shout out to Eric Middleford, who's the series editor for our series that contains Furnace and Fugue Studies in Early Modern German History. And he answered the origin of fugue state in the comment section, and that it was a mental disorder around the turn of the last century, so connected to travel by train. So thank you very much, Eric. And there's another question for Tara and Donna, and do you have any other projects like this in the making? The question, so any other illustrated alchemical books, like the Book of Lambspring, or the illustrated works of Robert Flood or Athanasius Kircher, if I pronounced that correctly, or are you kind of done with this kind of project? Was one enough?
One and done for me, although, you know, Pete, there's a lifetime of work that you could imagine doing this, right? I mean, you've listed some good projects in the making, so.
Yeah. I think that Johann Haesler has a project on the go with Kircher. And, you know, I think about how interesting it might be to do the library and laboratory of Michael Meyer, because as Tara pointed out and others have pointed out, the discourses really are a portal into the alchemical corpus as it is by 1618. So I don't have any immediate plans. I'm actually working on a couple of different projects to do with gold and mercury in a different kind of context. But I don't know, I have a feeling that Maya and I are gonna meet again. So to be continued, yeah.
And then there's two questions that I kind of want to link together, and that is, A, did all of you draw on other digital editions that are already extant as inspiration for creating your own, or did it really just emerge out of the wonderful weirdness of Maya's work? And what advice would you give scholars embarking on constructing a similar project and putting together a similar digital edition? So both your inspiration and advice going forward for others, what you learned through this process.
I think I want to jump in here and say it's not always about getting all your ducks in a row and making a plan. Like Furnace and Fugue, before it became Furnace and Fugue, the project developed organically, and it followed a path that was determined by curiosity, really, and support. And Furnace and Fugue, the project itself, you know, it almost foundered and died a couple of times before it got to the point where I got the fellowship at Science History Institute, and then got to meet Tara, and then had the fortuitous opportunity to work at Brown on this. So sometimes it's doing what you feel, not sometimes, fundamentally, it's about doing what you believe is the right thing to do, as opposed to perhaps the expected thing to do, and seeing where that takes you. It's my view.
I wonder, Crystal, if you or Allison, if you want to copy, because I think in terms of how it came to look the way it looks, we had no idea it would turn out this way when we began. I mean, we had ideas, but it really was a sort of a leap. And the role of the technologists and the designers, Studio Rainwater, we haven't mentioned yet, but there's a whole, you know, team of people who are not visible here today, whose creativity and vision, and also, you know, following kind of Atalanta Fugiens, who had their own visual resources to draw from. So I wonder if either of you two want to comment on that, Allison or Crystal?
Crystal, I'll let you start.
So I'm kind of going back to our research and discovery phase of the project, which was several years ago. But I remember for the digital edition in particular, the Getty's, Pietro Bellini's inventory and verse was a really huge inspiration for how to figure out how to get the facsimile and the transcription working together. And other parts like the Emblem image search that drew heavily from Harvard Art Museum's image search as well. So we took inspiration from a variety of places, most of them scholarly, academic places, but also really anywhere we could sort of imagine these like modern readers wanting to visualize something in a way that wasn't like harkening back to this like early modern time. So I can't say that for the essays, I can't talk about that. That was done by Studio Rainwater, so I'm not sure exactly where their inspiration came from, but we did pull inspiration from some other projects of our age, but about 17th century works to get ours going.
I think I would just to jump in there to add that, you know, we wanted this to look early modern, but we also wanted it to look modern. So, you know, I remember, Crystal, you had mood boards at one point, and, you know, with all kinds of sort of chemical images and things like that, and colors. And, you know, we talked a lot about color schemes. You know, if it was too white, would that look too early? You know, we imagine early modern paper as kind of brown now, you know, with that. So we had a lot of those kinds of conversations that I've never had about a book before, you know, so, which made it really fun. That's maybe more on the design side, but.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too to say I mean, it was so collaborative, as it's, I'm sure, clear to everyone who's with us today. And there were a lot of conversations, constant conversations in person, over Skype, through Slack, through email, because there was no model. You know, there were inspirations, but there was no formula really out there already for what we were doing for the whole package. And so we had to figure it out along the way. So I think one of the most innovative features of Furnace and Fugue, the interactive collection curatorial space, that was not planned, and that only came up really in the last phase of design and development. And for me, from an editorial perspective, I was looking for a strategic way to unite the two main components, the digital edition and the scholarly essays. And I was starting to see them as separate when we knew that they weren't. And so I approached that problem from an editorial perspective, again, trying to bring those together. And of course, Crystal and Sarah Rainwater and her team, Willow, and Sarah Verity, and Jake Kamara, our developer, also had other ideas and challenges that they saw there. So I think that you, in terms of advice, be flexible, be as creative as you can. We never stifled our creativity, and I think that's sort of the best advice. I mean, I know there are certain limitations around funding and resources, but I think especially at the beginning, think really big and differently, and I think that's how you can move forward and arrive at another model. So we certainly see Furnace and Fugue as a model. There will be others. We hope this paves the way and inspires other people, and we look forward to being inspired by the projects that will follow Furnace and Fugue.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. And I think part of that question too was, which I didn't mention before, is do you have any advice for researchers setting out to create a digital project of non-illustrated text, so it doesn't have that immediate appeal of Furnace and Fugue, and maybe you have some others in the pipeline for your initiative that are more text-based and less visual?
We do, yes. I mean, yes, this is one of the special things about Furnace and Fugue, is we have these really bizarre images that you just want to really dive into and spend a lot of time with them. So other projects that we have in the pipeline have illustrations, but the illustrations don't have the same burden of work to do, if you will. We don't rely as much on the images. And so projects like that, we've really put a lot more energy and creative thinking into navigation, for example. How the content is organized, of course, is always important, but what level of agency we're giving the readers in entering into the site and then exploring the content. So we have one author who's very interested in a layered reading experience with parallel narratives that brings its own sort of development and editorial complications to the project, but it also opens a whole new way of engaging with the narrative. We have another author who's very interested in nonlinear reading experiences, which is very similar as well. So yes, there are certainly ways, projects that bring innovation and engagement that don't have to focus on images, on the visual culture.
Thank you very much. One other question I want to pivot to now is, again, classroom use. And Tara, you had mentioned a few ways to use collection in the classroom. Are there other exercises that you could share with our attendees that you've already thought of how to make the most of this project in the classroom?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. The annotation tools, so I played around a bit with Hypothesis with a much earlier version of Furnace and Fugue, and since I see this question comes from Brown, we were in the library, you know, the digital scholarship lab there, so we had the site up on some very large screens, and I created a group and then pointed students to a particular emblem, and they started annotating it in real time so we could see the annotation. So first of all, learning how to ask questions about an early modern text, or any text really, I think it doesn't come easily to everyone to know what to ask. And so having students say, like, I don't get this word, you know, what does this word mean? It looks like some technical thing. Or now they were doing it, we were just sort of doing it very informally. So they of course Googled everything. They started putting in links and, you know, Wikipedia entries. And so then you can have a conversation about, like, what are good sources to, you know, use to find out the answers to these sorts of things. But I think that initial moment of how do you take a text that frankly is very intimidating, Atalanta Fugiens can be very intimidating, and, you know, embrace your curiosity and confusion and sort of go for it and learn how to ask questions and comment on each other's questions. So that was something we did collectively in a way that, you know, maybe we can do that digitally now, you know, or you have to be in real life in a classroom where everyone is looking at the same digital object, right? Donna, I know you've played around with it in teaching as well.
Yeah, and in a way, I think this connects to Lauren Cassell's question that I can see in the Q&A in terms of, you know, how letting go, and how do you deal with, you know, students who want to take it in a direction that, you know, might be startling or challenging to your own position as an early modern scholar. I've played with it in my, like, literally played with it in my classroom in allowing the students to chart their own paths followed by curiosity that may actually have no scholarly basis or grounding. I know I might be saying something shocking and terrible to, you know, 69 scholars listening in here, but sometimes you just got to let people play around with things without the pressure of having to perform as a student, you know, and then see what comes up. And then, as Tara says, start filtering and sorting and inviting students, you know, to share why they think in a certain way and what it's connecting to, because they might be making associations that their connections are being made based on things that don't have to do with the discipline of history, but upon further conversation and a mindful unpacking could be drawn fruitfully into a conversation about history, historiography, and the humanities, you know, as a disciplinary exercise in thinking. So Furnace and Fugue for me, like, this is really meant to be broken and pushed and challenged, and because we have a strong core that we've created that we're going to stand by, and then how everybody else is going to use it and work it, you can always return to that core. That can be your North Star, if you will, your guiding light. But I expect people to use this in ways, both in my classrooms, as has already been proven to me last term. And also, I mean, you can't control how people want to engage with something and want to try things out. And, you know, we're putting something out there that is tempting people, that is inviting people to be maybe unorthodox in their thinking and in their connections, and how they play with the music and mix and match with the images. So I see this as a teaching tool pedagogically. I see Furnace and Fugue as an invitation to experiment in the classroom, both instructors and students together embarking on an adventure, and then deciding, you know, what kind of map you might want to chart based on these kinds of conversations in terms of your pedagogical goals.
Can I just follow up on that into Lauren's question in particular, is to say that one of the things about about Atalanta Fugiens, as many of you here know, is it was a living book from the moment it was created. People started doing their own translations and taking it apart and, you know, just playing with the images, playing with the text. And the book is alive and well today and circulates in 21st century digital spaces, bits and pieces of it. And so I think while we are early modernists and have a particular stake in, you know, getting it right as scholars of the early modern past, we also, I anyway, am very open to seeing how people want to carry this through and find meaning in it today. Maybe not my students if I'm trying to teach them something about the early modern period, but, you know, if that's the point of my class. But I think allowing, you know, graphic designers or practicing alchemists or architects or whatever to, like, take this and run with it, I think it's fun. I'm interested in that, right? So.
And your students might end up being architects and artists and graphic designers. So
I'll just jump in quickly and say that from the standpoint of teaching music, there's a tremendous amount of nuts and bolts stuff you can do with this. Both like for undergrads or for graduate students, the fact that you have a modern edition and a historical edition side by side with recordings that you can mute voices. There's just so much that you can do with that tool set alone, even before you start thinking about the kind of early modern context and the, you know, multidisciplinary multimedia aspect of the book. There's just as a basic tool set for teaching music, there's a lot to be gleaned there, I think. I'm hoping that people dive into that a bit.
Yeah, thank you for these very fulsome answers to this very important question. Another one that came up, and that's changing topics a little bit, is actually about the alchemy of the team and any difficulties that you encountered in working together, which is creating this edition, and lessons you've learned. What would you have done differently? I know we used the metaphor of providing a glimpse under the hood before, so I think that kind of question gets to it too, that all 5 of you could answer. Lessons learned, difficulties.
I'll jump in with, I found Skype to be kind of cumbersome and difficult because I was the one that was always being beamed in, except when Tara was away for the year that Tara was away. I found I really missed face-to-face. That for me was one of the biggest challenges, even though the team made this Herculean effort to basically have me present as a you know, image on a laptop. And sometimes I would be moved around like the table in the rock where everyone was gathered. But for me, one of the hardest things was working remotely. Ironically, it turns out to have been one of the most important kinds of prep for the situation that we currently find ourselves in. But for me, yeah, in terms of the alchemy of the team, it was the alchemy of technology that I actually struggled with. And I know in conversation with some other team members that, because you can't, I don't know, it's in a project that's building collaboratively, sometimes it was really hard for me to beam in. And I was a little sort of jealous and heartsick that everybody else was like in one space and I was like phoning in from my car while I was waiting for alternate side street parking to like open up a space kind of thing. So yeah, that's the first thing that jumps to my mind. The challenges of collaborating when so many people are in different places and coordinating all of that.
I'll add a few things, and to say that, I mean, this is sort of stating the obvious, but multidisciplinary collaboration is hard sometimes, right? Like we didn't always understand each other. I think when the music stuff got technical, or the technical stuff got technical, or, you know, GitHub this or whatever, like we didn't all come to this with the same level. We had different expertises, I suppose. And so sometimes that was hard and a welcome challenge, but a difficult challenge. I think you know, there's also a kind of power imbalance built into this, in that the project was at Brown and really benefited from Brown in so many ways, but also had people who weren't at Brown. And so the sort of pull always towards Brown. I mean, that's true of any edited project. You have your editors and, you know, and your contributors, but I think the kind of different positionalities in the academy that Donna mentioned earlier bring certain challenges as well. In terms of what I think maybe I would have done differently, I think the thing that I keep coming back to with this project is that I couldn't envision it until it was done. And I wish I had other models like Furnace and Fugue when we started Furnace and Fugue, so that I could see what kinds of things were possible. And then as I was writing my essay, as our authors were writing their essays, we could have sent them, you know, 15 amazing digital sort of projects like ours, digital publications like ours that could have sort of sparked their creativity as they were writing. But we didn't have that, so we had to create it. Now that I've seen it, you know, I might think differently if I'm going to, I don't know, if I'm going to, you know, write it something like this again. And I hope that that is useful for other scholars who want to take on projects like this. I mean, I really think that the creating models like this can open up other kinds of thinking. So maybe we could have been more creative in the beginning if we'd had other things to think about.
We were kind of building the car as we were driving it.
Yeah, so I mean, they call them pilot projects for very good reason, right? Everything about this was new. You know, we didn't have 15 other models, but we have something really great now to share with the world. So, you know, also I came on board 2.5 years into our first 5-year grant cycle. So halfway through, and I guess about a year of work had been done at least on Furnace and Fugue. So I had to get to know the project, the team, you know, the author's vision, as much as that vision existed already. And so, you know, it did take longer than I think future projects will take, but we figured so much out. I mean, it's really remarkable. We also, you know, we took a lot of risks here. We fully built out Furnace and Fugue before I took it on the road and started talking to prospective publishers about it, because I don't think any of us were, or I certainly wasn't comfortable with any of the partial build outs that we had, because that wasn't representative of the whole project as that vision really started to gel. And so we just kept working at it and chipping away and you know, creating this full site, which of course still benefited tremendously from peer reviewer feedback, from the editorial team, from Nadine at Virginia, from the wonderful copy editor at Virginia, from, you know, the marketing team, et cetera. So, but that was quite risky. I have to say, I had some sleepless nights in the beginning. And so we no longer approach the projects that way. We build out a partial site, a demo site, that we bring it to the point where it is representative of the whole, and then we pitch that to publishers, but we just weren't able to do it before now. So, you know, Furnace and Fugue really paves the way, not just for future projects in the initiative at Brown, but I do think well beyond Brown, and for a whole variety of scholars in many disciplines and beyond the humanities as well. I think the possibilities here are endless. I think we're just at the beginning of a very exciting next phase in scholarly publishing.
Thank you, Alison. And I was actually wondering, Crystal, as the designer, was there anything on the technical end that you would have done differently, or was it a pretty smooth process from envisioning to implementing those amazing, amazing features that you showed us?
It's not a smooth process at all. I can tell you that. One of the things that we did throughout the project was just to continually test what we were doing, both technically and as well as conceptually. So again, when we were talking about like design inspiration, we would pick pieces of other projects and try and implement them in ours. And then as we tested them, they might not have worked for what we were doing or for the audiences that we were trying to reach. So really, it was more like trying to overcome this unknown. And we remember even at the beginning trying to nail down like who the audience was, and then trying to figure out like who we were building for. That was like a really big focus really early on in the project, because that's going to influence not only the way you write, but also the way you create, the way things are, the decisions you make the entire way through. So technically, testing was the thing that helped us through, testing often. And I think there are like a million ways that things can go wrong digitally, unfortunately. Just on all the devices, even in the rooms when we were in a team, people were in like, 5, 8 different devices and trying to figure out why things weren't displaying the way they should in like someone else's computer or tablet. That was always a challenge, but it's a challenge with any digital project. So it's not unique, but it's not a smooth process at all. We just kind of keep at it until we're confident that it's solid.
Great, thank you. So the lesson is test some more, and then test again.
Yeah.
For these digital projects. I think we are nearing the end of our time. So thank you to everybody who's been asking a question. If we haven't answered your question, you can email any of us and we'll get back to you in that medium. And the last question I want to ask, though, I think it's a very good one, and that's about the concept of open. repeatedly we've said this is an open access resource. It's free for anybody and available to share widely. But the question is, as the digital publications initiative, are you going to release documentation code or reflections that might help others replicate this kind of process? So I think we should end on that note, and on the question of how open is this open resource.
I'm going to pass it off to Crystal to answer that, but about sharing of resources. But I would just say my final words, it is not a condition of the Mellon grant that Brown's digital publications be open access, but certainly to date, our authors want to go that route. And when I first started speaking with the team at Virginia, it was pretty quickly, we decided that a resource like Furnace and Fugue should be open, should be freely accessible to everyone. And I know that Tara and Donna supported that decision as well. And so we're really happy with the publication as an open access title. And I'll let Crystal speak to the specifics of how to access our work.
Great. So we are actually in the process right now of sort of like a post-publication debrief with all the members of our technical team at the library of how to create all of this documentation. We have some in our About the Project page. So if you go to the table of contents and scroll down to the bottom, you can get to About, and we'll list a lot of the tools and technologies that we use and how those things were put together. There is some documentation linked from that area. There's like a technical details section of the About page that will give you some of the code that we use as well. But until this sort of debrief is over and we actually create like really well-written documentation that people like you, Zoe, I think I've actually recognized you from another conference, wondering about how people can replicate what we've done or take ideas of what we've done technologically and use that in their own projects. That's still to come, but right now I'd say the About page is the best thing, and then the GitHub links from that will also lead you to some more documentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to all 5 panelists for joining me in this conversation today. I hope our audience enjoyed the look inside, the glimpse under the hood of how this project came about and all its amazing features. And again, invite you to explore Furnace and Fugue and share it as much as you can and enjoy. And hopefully it will be a blueprint for similar digital projects going forward. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Nadine. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody, and
Bye.
you all.
Yay!
Bye.